Cool. Okay, everyone. Thank you for coming out on a Saturday to our first Saturday SYB webinar. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend to join us for this really special topic. It's the first time we've presented anything like this, and it's a really, really important subject for anyone who's concerned with protecting themselves about EMF. Certainly reducing your exposure and protecting yourself against those sources is important, but there's other aspects to building your resilience to damage from EMF radiation, and that's why I asked Cathy to present this really important subject. I know you all have a lot of things going on in your life, especially on a weekend, so I really appreciate the time you've set aside to join us today. Okay, just a quick disclaimer. The short version of this is not medical advice. This is information based on the research and opinions of Cathy and SYB. So please just realize that as you hear all of the information that will be shared today. So very quick outline. We'll go through intros. That'll be really quick as usual. Then we'll get into the main content. That'll be about 35 minutes. I will have a special offer for you, but I expect everyone will be hanging around for the Q&A, which is when Cathy will answer your questions. Some of you submitted those in advance. For those who have questions during the webinar, I'm going to ask you to post them into the Q&A pod, not into the chat pod. If they go into the chat pod, they will probably be missed. So if there's a Q&A pod, so if a question at any time, you can put it in there, and Cathy will get to that at the end. Very, very briefly about me, your host for today's webinar. My name is R. Blank. I'm the CEO of Shield Your Body, formerly on the engineering faculty of USC Viterbi School. Co-authored along with my father, Dr. Martin Blank, Overpowered, about the science of EMF health effects. And this all follows a 20-year career in software engineering. So that was me. Now here at SYB, we spend a lot of time, and I spend a lot of time, talking about ways to reduce our exposure to EMF radiation so we can avoid or reduce the biological impact it will have on us and our bodies. We all know we should be reducing our use of technology. And we also know that we need to increase the distance from that tech when it is in use, because those are the two key ways of protecting yourselves from EMF radiation. And then of course, you can use EMF protection products to shield your body from those exposures as well. But there are other things that we can do to protect ourselves and to boost our resilience. I apologize that my microphone is getting a little in my face here, so I'm getting a little cut off on the stream, but so what is it that we can do to make our bodies more resilient to defend against environmental toxins, including electromagnetic radiation? I get this question all the time, and people want to know what those other ways are. And this is increasingly important, right? Because we can shield our bodies pretty effectively against those sources in our immediate control, like our phones and our laptops and Wi-Fi routers and things like that. But increasingly, we're exposed to radiation from sources that we can't control, like cell towers and neighbors' Wi-Fi networks, and increasingly satellites. So you really need to take a more holistic approach to building your body's defenses. And that's why I've invited our senior EMF consultant, Cathy Cooke, to speak to all of you today about this topic, because in addition to being a certified building biologist and a certified electromagnetic radiation specialist, Cathy is also a board certified holistic nutritionist. So if there was anyone who could speak to this subject, I knew it was going to be Cathy, and I know how much she loves to talk about nutrition. So as I mentioned, Cathy, today's speaker, she is a building biology environmental consultant. She's also certified as an electromagnetic radiation specialist by the Building Biology Institute. She's also a board certified holistic nutritionist. She says she's a self-proclaimed sleep expert, but she really is a sleep expert. And she consults through not just Shield Your Body, but also wholehomeandbodyhealth.com. Cathy is originally from Kansas City, Missouri. She currently lives in Boise, Idaho, but actually currently, she is traveling around the United States. And so she's joining us from an undisclosed secure location. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Cathy. So let me stop my share and give Cathy the power she needs to do her thing. There.
Disable.
There you go, Cathy. It's yours.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you. Let me get to my screen here. Let's see here if you can all see this. Oh, let's see. There we go. Is that image looking okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay.
That's great. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, R. I'm, like you said, this is my topic of passion here. So I love to talk about all things EMF and all things nutrition. So this is fantastic. I'm actually in New Mexico right now. Beautiful, sunny, warm New Mexico. And I just want to do a quick disclaimer that I had a cold last week. And so my voice is a little rough. I think I'll be okay, but if it gets a little scratchy, that is why. So let's get right into it. So for those of you that have heard me speak before, you may have heard my story about how I got into this field. It's kind of a long story, so I won't go through the whole thing, but to quickly summarize, basically I had numerous health challenges since I was bit by a tick when I was 12. And since that time, I've been studying everything health related that I could get my hands on in order to improve my health. And I became certified as a holistic nutritionist in 2014. And I've been officially working as a holistic health coach since that time. However, in 2015, I experienced pretty much an all-time low in my health. And even though I was doing everything right and really had everything dialed in, I felt really awful. I had bad insomnia, anxiety, brain fog, memory issues, tinnitus or tinnitus, lack of energy. No matter what I did, I could not get a handle on these lingering issues. So the topic of EMFs kept coming up for me, but it was just out of my realm of understanding, so I just kept ignoring it. But finally, after a period of real desperation, I just decided to unplug my Wi-Fi, and I committed to not using my phone for about a week. And lo and behold, all of my symptoms began to improve, and my tinnitus was gone in 3 days. I was sleeping better. My anxiety was completely gone. In short, it just completely changed my life. So at that moment, I knew I was going to have to know everything there was to know about this topic. And so I enrolled in the Building Biology Institute and became certified in 2018. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. So that is how I come to you today to talk about both nutrition and EMFs and how they align. So just to give you a little bit of background on that. And for those of you, my formatting is a little strange. That's weird. Sorry about this line through the center here if you're seeing that, but that's odd. So if you're not familiar with the Building Biology Institute, I definitely suggest you check them out. Fantastic nonprofit organization that trains people to basically find the issues in a home or any building that may be causing health problems. So they have a ton of great free information on their website. I recommend you check them out. Okay, so let's jump right into our topic today. So if you've watched our other webinars, then you know that the most important thing you can do to protect yourself against EMFs is to reduce the exposure inside your own home. You have control over what's in your home. And if you can, have a low EMF environment where you spend the most amount of your time, especially where you sleep, then you're doing a tremendous amount to protect yourself. It is true, however, that we have to go out into the world. And some of us may work in an office building that has many exposures. Our kids may spend many hours every day in a school with Wi-Fi. They have smartphones. Everybody else has fitness trackers and, you know, numerous other radio frequency items, more and more items that I'm finding every day. So this is why I hear so many people just say, why even bother? They just throw their hands up and say, why even bother? Because I'm bombarded all the time. But the good news, though, is that there is a lot that you can do to protect yourself on a cellular level against the exposure that you do get. So even if we have exposures we can't control, we can protect ourselves to some degree from the inside out. Our diet plays an important role here, as of course do our lifestyle habits. So we're going to cover all of these areas today. But first, I want to take a little bit of time to explain how EMFs actually affect us on a cellular level. And this is important to understand so that we can then understand how nutrition and our lifestyle habits can actually help to mitigate our exposure. So if you're on this webinar, you know that EMFs are a health risk, but you also know that there are many critics who claim that the science is inconclusive, right? The reality, however, is that there are tens of thousands of studies demonstrating negative health effects from EMF exposure. And if you haven't read R's blog on the health risks associated with cell phones, I strongly encourage you to do so. It will give you a great primer on the science, and it reviews how EMFs impact your DNA, your nervous system, your brain, and the associated illnesses from long-term exposure. So we don't have enough time to cover all of these areas adequately today, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to cover the action steps that you can take. So we'll leave a link to that article in the chat so you can review it when you get a chance. I do, however, want to take just a few minutes to cover the basics, the basic ways that EMFs affect us on a cellular level, which will help you understand how nutrition can actually play a role in protecting your cells. Okay, so what researchers have found is that when a cell is exposed to non-native or human-made EMFs, they activate what's called the voltage-gated calcium channels, or VGCCs for short. So what the heck is a VGCC? Well, specific cells in your body, mostly the muscle cells, glial cells, and neuronal cells, your brain cells, they have proteins on the outer membrane that open and close to let in certain nutrients. The VGCCs are responsible for controlling how much calcium is let into the cell. And calcium plays a critical role inside the cell, instigating certain processes like muscle contraction, synthesizing neurotransmitters, and supporting mitochondria function, just to name a few. These cells will not be able to function optimally without enough calcium. However, too much calcium can cause its own set of problems. So once inside the cell, elevated levels of calcium can rupture the outer membrane of the mitochondria. And when excess calcium gets into the nucleus, it can negatively impact genetic material, which can interfere with cell death. Additionally, too much calcium inside the cell can cause excess levels of oxidative stress. So much of the work explaining this phenomenon has been done by Dr. Martin Pall. He's a professor emeritus of Washington State University. And what Paul has discovered is that when excess calcium enters the cell, it can increase the synthesis of nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is very important for healthy blood flow, and it has an important role in the body. But when there's too much nitric oxide, it can combine with superoxide to create something called peroxynitrite. Okay? So peroxynitrite is a potent oxidant. And oxidants create free radicals. And these are damaging to the cells and tissues inside the body. So you've probably heard of antioxidants and that you should eat foods that are high in antioxidants. And so these are very important to counteract the pro-oxidants that are formed inside the body, especially when we are exposed to this excess EMF exposure. So oxidants or pro-oxidants can be formed inside the body by numerous things like chemicals, heavy metals, stress, refined foods, air pollution, and of course, EMFs. So Paul has shown that EMFs artificially open these voltage-gated calcium channels. And so when you think about your body is electric, right? And these gates are voltage. They're controlled by electricity. So when you are in proximity to a non-native EMF, these voltage gates artificially open, calcium floods into the cell, and you get oxidative stress. So now you want to know, well, what kind of problems can happen from oxidative stress? And I mean, the answer to this is pretty much anything. So most of our chronic health conditions today actually stem from underlying oxidative stress issues. And this can damage the cells and the tissues, like I mentioned, and can result in numerous different symptoms and health conditions. So when it comes to oxidative stress caused by EMF exposure, the most common symptoms that I see include insomnia, tinnitus, both of which I had severely, headaches, fatigue, pain, numbness and tingling, especially people will get numbness and tingling in their arms or their legs, cognitive impairment, you know, that brain fog and you just can't think straight, a stabbing sensation. A lot of people will say it's like they feel like they're being constantly stabbed. That's usually from dirty electricity. Anxiety is very high, depression, all kinds of neurological issues, heart palpitations. That's a very common symptom as well. So in addition to these symptoms, research has shown that certain illnesses like cancer, leukemias, dementia, Parkinson's, ADD, ADHD, infertility, and other serious conditions can actually be linked to oxidative stress and EMF exposure. So this is serious. So though we understand the biological mechanisms that make EMF exposure so dangerous, some people have a hard time believing it could be so. So how can you believe in something that's invisible? You can't hear it, smell it, taste it, or see it. It's very easy to ignore something you can't see and go about your day not having to think about it, right? But not everyone has this luxury. The fact is, many people can feel the EMFs. In fact, they can feel them so acutely that they can't be out in public or their symptoms will be too severe. And I have many, many clients like this. So these people are known as electrohypersensitive, or EHS for short. And EHS is actually a diagnosable disability in many countries. So that fact alone should really tell you something. But for those people that don't feel it and can't see it, smell it, taste it, hear it, it's easy for them to ignore. So the million-dollar question then remains is, why are some people so sensitive when others are not? So it turns out there are numerous reasons why some people have symptoms from their exposure while others do not. And researchers have identified several what we call precursors or underlying issues that can make some people more likely to experience symptoms. And these include things like physical trauma, emotional trauma, heavy metals, chemicals or excess chemical exposure, genetics, high or chronic EMF exposure, a mold exposure, very common, and underlying infections, things like a parasite or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or other infections. So in my work with clients, I found this to be very true. The most sensitive people I know have experienced at least one, if not numerous, of these precursors. And you know, the unfortunate fact is that in our modern chemically based world, it's difficult to not experience some of these issues. And this is why we see the number of people experiencing EHS symptoms increasing every day. The good news, though, is that there is a lot we can do to protect ourselves from the EMF exposure that we do have. As we always say here at SYB, the best EMF protection is free. Your first line of defense should always be to reduce your EMF promoting devices and create distance from your devices you can't control. This is the best, most reliable, surefire way to protect your body. When you are exposed, your second line of defense is to shield from those sources. We have a great blog on this topic that I encourage you to read if you haven't already, and we can put a link to that in the chat so you can learn more about the topic about shielding. So it's important to address any of the precursors listed above. If you are having EMF symptoms, EHS symptoms, even if you're not, most of us have some areas that we can improve on when it comes to these precursors. I mean, who among us haven't experienced emotional, psychological traumas or stresses? Most of us have. Probably most of us have experienced, physical traumas, even a concussion. I've had, I think, up to 6 concussions, which is partly part of the reason why I became sensitive as well. So you may need to work with a qualified healthcare practitioner, as most of these issues really do require expert guidance. This isn't really a DIY issue on most of these. So of course we understand that there will be times when you simply can't avoid nor shield from your exposures. And in that case, it's important for you to understand how you can protect your body from the inside out. The great news is that if you're already incorporating healthy lifestyle habits, then you're already making your body more resilient to the EMF exposure that you do encounter from day to day. So as we just talked about, one of the primary ways that EMFs affect your body is through oxidative stress. So what combats oxidative stress? Antioxidants, like we mentioned. And where do you get antioxidants? In a diet that is rich with brightly colored, deeply pigmented fruits, vegetables, and herbs. Nearly all plants have some degree of antioxidants, and more of these helper molecules are found in the pigments of the plants. So that's why nutritionists like myself encourage you to add dark and brightly colored plants to all of your meals. So good and common choices include things like blueberries, cherries, rosemary, cinnamon, paprika, green leafy vegetables, cocoa, who doesn't love that, pomegranate, plums, acai berries, just to name a few. There's a lot more on this picture here, and you probably have your own favorites. So it's worth noting that not only are you getting antioxidants from a diet rich in these foods, but you're also getting vitamins, minerals, and other phytonutrients. And those are all critical for optimal health. So most plant foods also contain decent amount of fiber, and fiber is a key component for balancing blood sugar levels. The importance of balancing your blood sugar cannot be overstated. Balanced blood sugar is the foundation for healthy hormone levels, proper weight management, healthy response to stress, quality sleep, a positive mental outlook and cognitive function, and pretty much all other biochemical processes. So no matter what your EMF exposure is, you should be including some of these foods in every meal. And another important consideration when you're shopping for your nutrient-dense foods is how the food was grown. I strongly encourage you to choose organic foods whenever possible. So given the propensity for chemicals like pesticides and herbicides to increase health symptoms, choosing foods without these chemicals is a great step towards better health. I recommend the Environmental Working Group, who puts out an updated list every year detailing the foods that are highest and lowest in pesticides and herbicides. And this is a handy tool for anyone, to help you choose the right foods to purchase organic. So if budget is a concern for you, choosing the organic foods that are on what's called the Dirty Dozen list, and then some of the foods that are on the safe list, you might not have to choose organic things like avocados and bananas and things like that with thick skins. But I encourage you to check out their list. Okay, so once you have your diet dialed in, you may want to consider nutritional supplements for some extra defense. So given the high levels of EMF exposure many of us have, adding appropriate supplements to our regimen can be a good idea. Please note that you should always speak with your healthcare provider before taking any supplements or changing your diet. Not all supplements or dietary choices are appropriate for all people. And in my research regarding EMFs, there are a few supplements that really stand out. The first would be magnesium. So research has shown that between 50 to 80% of Americans are deficient in magnesium. And this is a mineral that's responsible for over 300 biochemical reactions in the body. Magnesium is also a calcium channel blocker. So you see the connection. As we learned a minute ago, EMFs artificially open the voltage-gated calcium channels. So taking a magnesium supplement can help to dampen this action. Other calcium channel blockers include things like cat's claw and witch hazel and a few other random supplements, which a lot of people haven't heard of, but they can be appropriate too for some people. Okay, so in addition to calcium channel blockers, there are numerous antioxidant supplements on the market. Some of my favorite include astaxanthin, vitamin C, glutathione, propolis, it's a bee product, powdered greens, and hydrogen water. So every time I get on a plane, for example, I take with me astaxanthin and vitamin C, glutathione. I take all of those before the flight. If it's a long flight, I'll do it during, and then I take it after the flight. I also take melatonin, which is another excellent antioxidant, and sometimes I'll take that on the plane as well. So because EMFs can also negatively impact the nervous system, I often recommend certain foods and supplements that offer nervous system support. These include, of course, omega-3s. Omega-3s are found in cold water fish or fish oil, a good quality fish oil. If you're going to take fish oil, you got to make sure it's a very, very good quality. B vitamins, extremely important. Phosphatidylcholine is excellent. Lecithin and lion's mane. And lion's mane is a mushroom, which is fantastic for nervous system support as well. And finally, I like to support the body's own antioxidant defense system with foods like broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. Those are all cruciferous vegetables. And then chocolate and green tea. These are all excellent food sources to actually encourage the body to make its own antioxidants. And who doesn't love any of these foods? Maybe you don't love Brussels sprouts, but you should because they're excellent. I love them. Okay, so I realized that I went through a lot of that very quickly, and some of that information was a bit scientific and maybe hard to grasp. So I just want to take a minute to summarize the information by breaking it down into 3 quick and easy action steps that you can start doing right away. I want to make this as simple as possible for you guys. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is start adding in more deeply pigmented fruits and vegetables into every meal like we mentioned. It's best to focus on vegetables and fruits. Well, no, it's best to focus on vegetables, but use fruits very sparingly so that you don't overdo your sugar intake. So it's really easy actually to add vegetables to each meal. If you have, a side salad or a few servings of your favorite vegetable, that's really all you need to do. And people tell me, well, what about breakfast? I can't add vegetables for breakfast. And I'm like, why not? Why can't you eat vegetables for breakfast? Breakfast does not have to be sweet foods. For some reason, Americans got into the habit of having cereals and pastries and donuts, bagels, and really carb-heavy sweet foods for breakfast. That's actually one of the worst things you can do, because then that sets up your blood sugar balance to be all over the place for the rest of the day. You really want to focus on, balancing your macronutrients, which I'll talk about in a minute, to make sure that your blood sugar is stable. So when you're choosing your vegetables, you also need to remember to mix it up. Okay, diversity is very important. You do not want to eat the same things all the time. So be adventurous and try new vegetables as often as you can. This is one thing that I see my clients doing kind of all the time, is they eat the exact same foods pretty much constantly. And most Americans eat something like 10 vegetables. There's just no diversity. And those 10 vegetables actually are more like one vegetable because it's the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kale, which are actually all from the same plant. So they have very little diversity. I like to give the tip of telling people to go to an ethnic market, like a Chinese market or an Asian market. You know, there's Ethiopian markets. Those, if you've got markets in your area like that, or small grocery stores, and get new vegetables that you've never tried before, and just throw those into your meal. Just be adventurous, because it's that diversity that's really going to support your gut health and bring in different types of antioxidants with each meal. Okay, number 2, your second action step is to use spices liberally. So in my work as a nutritionist, I'm always surprised by how underutilized spices are. Many people are intimidated on how to use spices properly when cooking. And let's face it, our American foods are really bland. If you've ever been to another country, pretty much any other country, maybe except Canada, but if you go to Mexico or Europe, India, China, I mean, the flavor of their foods is off the charts, where our food is like super bland. And this is a shame, because spices add a tremendous amount of flavor and nutrients to your food. Even small amounts of spices can add a lot of antioxidants to your meals. In fact, herbs like rosemary and coriander have actually been found to protect against radiation. So other good choices include cumin, cinnamon, paprika, cloves, cardamom, and turmeric. So if you're not experienced in using these spices, just look up some recipes. Indian and Thai recipes are good places to start, as they use many of these ingredients liberally in most dishes. And I found that they're pretty easy to cook. Okay, number 3, I always got to talk about blood sugar balance. Like I said, I cannot overemphasize this. So this is just important on so many levels. Just doing this one thing alone can make you feel better in so many ways. So to get started at each meal, I want you to fill half of your plate with vegetables. And so if you're doing action step number 1, you're probably already doing this anyway. And then I want you to choose a palm-sized portion of protein. So this is your palm, right? Not your whole hand, just your palm. And it's what your palm is, because, you know, my palm, the size of my palm is going to be much different than a guy who's 6'5" and weighs 250 pounds. So it's a palm-sized portion. It's appropriate for you. This can be a nice grass-fed meat, piece of wild-caught fish, pasture-based eggs, or a vegetable source that is low in carbohydrates. And then next, I want you to make sure you have some kind of fat in your meal. So dietary fatty acids are so important for brain health. They're important for hormone production, skin health, and protecting your internal organs. So good choices include avocados, coconuts, olives, cold water fatty fish, grass-fed dairy, if it agrees with you, and virgin oils like avocado and olive. Finally, you want a small amount of carbohydrates to meet your energy needs. The amount you need will depend on many factors like your age and activity levels. So I recommend that people start with half a cup of complex carbohydrates and then increase or decrease based on how you feel from there. So good choices include root vegetables like sweet potatoes, beets, and parsnips. Plantains are one of my favorites. And maybe small amounts of whole grains or legumes if you tolerate them and if they are prepared properly. This means that they have been soaked overnight or fermented in some way to break down some of the anti-nutrients that grains and legumes contain. And as I'm thinking about it, you know, I have a blood sugar guide. I should have made it available to you. If anybody wants my blood sugar guide that just kind of puts this all on a one pager, feel free to email me and I will send that to you. No problem. So that's pretty much it. Those 3 action steps right there are going to go a long way in actually protecting you against EMF exposure. And these are easy, you guys. You know, I'm not asking you to paint your entire house in Y-Shield paint and, you know, figure out if your grounding system has any resistance on it. I mean, those things are very, very complicated. And we should be, you know, addressing those issues. But right now, these are things you can do right now. For lunch or dinner or your next meal, you can put these steps into place, right? So you're already eating. So this isn't going to cost you more money, but just making these few simple steps is going to fuel your body with the vitamins, the minerals, and the phytonutrients it needs to perform its best. And I mean, really, what's not to love about that? Whoops, here we go. Okay, so in conclusion, the unfortunate truth is that we're going to be exposed to EMFs no matter where we live. And I mean, you know, I'm off grid often and I'm in these beautiful places, but anymore, I very rarely can find a place, even in the middle of nowhere, where there's no EMFs. It's very difficult. But thankfully, nature has provided us with some powerful tools to help mitigate the exposures that we can't control. And it goes without saying that in order to be optimally healthy, you should also be implementing stress management techniques, right? I mean, that almost might even be more important than everything else we've talked about today. You have to manage your stress. Must. It's a must. You should also be exercising appropriately for you, getting adequate sun exposure. Sun exposure is extremely important. You need to be putting some relaxation into, you know, part of your day, every day. And then human connections, very, very important for our daily routines. And I'll throw pets in there too. Pets can, if you don't like people, pets are great. So combining these practices along with a healthy diet, appropriate supplementation, addressing precursors, reducing your EMF exposure, and shielding where necessary will go a long way in keeping you healthy in this modern world. And these things are all things that all of us can do starting immediately. Okay, so I hope that information was helpful. And if you have any questions, I'm going to take some time to answer them. And they can be questions on anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be on diet and nutrition, which we've focused on today. They can be other, you know, EMF or air quality conditions, whatever. But first, I believe that R has a few things that he wants to touch on before we get to that.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Cathy. If you could turn off your share.
Yeah, I sure will.
And oh, and so 1 second, I need to reclaim host. And now I can share. Great. I hope everyone can see my screen. Thank you so much for that presentation, Cathy. And to everyone here, I put this in the chat pod, but I really love, and in fact, I'm going to go back one slide here. I really like, because nutrition, it's a really complicated subject, and there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of considerations and trade-offs. I mean, there's a reason, you know, it takes time and effort for someone like Cathy to become a certified nutritionist, because it's a complicated subject. But I really love how Cathy has made this, how accessible Cathy has made this information. With these 3 simple steps, you can really start making a change, making a difference in your body's natural resilience against multiple forces, but in particular for our interests, against damage from EMF. So Cathy, thank you so much for taking the time to present this information and for packaging it so accessibly and actionably. This subject is you know, it's hard to find reliable and actually scientifically based information on this topic, and I think it's a really great opportunity that everyone here is, obviously they appreciate it because they're taking time out of their Saturday, but they appreciate the opportunity to hear directly from a qualified expert like you. So yeah, we're going to get into Q&A. I see a couple of questions starting to come into the Q&A pod. Just a reminder to everyone, please post your questions in the Q&A pod, not in the chat pod, because they're easy to miss in the chat pod. And so to all of you here in attendance, I know you appreciate having access to someone of Cathy's caliber, with someone with Cathy's training and her expertise. Here at SYB, we get so many questions all of the time. Some are relatively easy to answer. Some aren't quite as easy. Some are really, really unique, and they take time to dive in and get you the answers that based on the right information. And we all know there's a lot of bogus information about EMF online. It can be really hard to know what's real, what's accurate, and what's reliable, which is why we offer virtual consulting through SYB, where you can book time with Cathy and get all your answers, all your questions answered by a real EMF expert. Now, virtual EMF consulting is a great way for a lot of people to get real information from an expert. It opens up the service to so many people who otherwise would not have access to that information. But of course, because it's virtual, there are some limitations, which is why in-person EMF assessments are so useful. But it can be really difficult to get in-person assessments performed. First, because there aren't that many EMF experts out there performing these assessments. So there's a good chance there isn't one near you. So the first step would be actually find a consultant. Then you need to figure out when they can travel to you. And that takes a lot of time and effort and cost, which is why it is so great that Cathy is going on tour. In fact, she is on tour right now. She is broadcasting from an undisclosed secure location in the Rocky Mountains. And this whole summer, this spring and summer, Cathy is traveling to New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Nevada, and California, and is available for you to book in-home EMF assessments. With an in-home assessment, you can get professional EMF readings, bring her own expert grade meters with her, and she is certified in their use by the Building Biology Institute. She can help you determine the problematic EMF sources based on her readings and her expertise and evaluating your environment. Cathy can help you identify the most problematic sources of EMF. And of course, it's not just EMF, because yes, Cathy is a real certified EMF expert, but she's also a certified building biologist, which means she can help diagnose other problematic issues in your home, including air quality, mold, VOCs, and other chemical pollutants. And finally, Cathy can work with you to create a plan for remediation, to map out a plan of action for you to create a healthier home for yourself and your family. So again, Cathy is on tour in the West this spring and summer. And she is offering a special discount to SYB's community. So Cathy is based in Idaho. So normally to book her time in other states, anywhere outside of Boise, you have to pay for her travel. But because she already has this travel planned, you don't need to pay anything extra. So you don't need to pay for her travel. What's more, Cathy will book time per hour. Sometimes with consultants, you have to buy a half day or a full day, and that's just the only way you can book their time. But with this special offer, you can just pay per hour, and you don't necessarily need a whole day of her time. You don't need to pay for time that you don't need. And again, best of all, because Cathy is so involved with the SYB community, she is offering a big discount on her rate. So normally she charges $150 an hour. You can save $20 an hour when you book your session. Just mention the coupon code HEALTH, or if you don't remember that, just say you saw her on this webinar and she'll know which discount you're talking about. So just do that when making your booking. This is a shortcut, Cathy's page on her website, which has more information, the specific tour dates, and how to book your session. So that is a really great deal on a valuable and difficult to find service. But I also realize that not all of you live in those states where Cathy is traveling to. So before we get into Q&A, I did just want to share a coupon for you as well to book time with Cathy through the virtual consulting. So that's on our website. It's SYB Consulting. You can book time easily and instantly, get personalized advice and detailed answers about EMF from Cathy from the comfort of your own home using Zoom on your own schedule, and you can get a recording of the session for future reference. And if you book your consulting session this weekend, you can save 35% on your order by entering the code consult35. Or consult 35. So you just go to shieldyourbody.com/consult, book your time, enter consult 35 at checkout, and you will save 35%. And this is an opportunity for you to get any questions you have answered in a one-on-one meeting with Cathy. And this is great, again, especially for those of you who may not be in the states that she is traveling to. So in short, these are the two offers I have for everyone here on today's webinar. And now it is time to get into Q&A. So Cathy, if it's okay with you, I'm going to start by reading a couple of the questions that were submitted in advance. That'll give people a little more time to post their questions into the Q&A pod if they're interested. So let's start here. So I don't, you're not going to be able to actually exactly answer this person's question, but maybe you have some information for them, which is, when is someone going to come up with an inexpensive home test kit for the foods we buy? We have tests for glyphosate and GMOs, as well as BT corn. I'm not quite sure what BT corn is, but basically, are there ways for people to get better insight into the quality of the food that they're purchasing?
Well, so I guess the question would be like, what are you trying to test? Are you trying to test the antioxidant level, or if there's pesticides and herbicides, or mineral content, or what?
Well, what do you recommend that people should try to evaluate in the foods that they buy?
What's that?
What do you think people should
try to I mean,
evaluate?
All of those are important considerations, right? So that's an awesome question, and I would love that. I don't know how realistic it is, but I mean, those are the things. When I'm shopping for food, those are the things that I want to know. Those are the things on the top of my mind. Does this food have a lot of mineral content? Does it have good vitamin content? Is it organic? You know, and I'm specifically a stickler for the organic because actually one of the reasons that I got heavily into nutrition is because when I was, I don't know, about 20 years ago, I was volunteering in South America, and for about half a year, and I felt great when I was down there. Better than I normally did, which is odd because people think, oh, you're going to another country, you're going to get sick and you're going to get all these infections and whatever. I didn't have any of that. But when I came back to the US, everything I put in my mouth gave me a horrible stomach ache. And I'm like, what is going on? And at the time, I was not a believer in organic foods. I mean, I didn't know what it meant. I thought it meant like bugs and worms and dirt. And it was like woo-woo to me. But when I had that experience, and I was like, what's the difference? What's going on here? What's the difference in the food that I was eating and the food that I'm eating right now? So I did a test. I went to, there was a health food store down the street, and I got a handful of organic apples and a handful of conventional apples. So one day I would eat the organic apple, and the next day I would eat the conventional apple. And sure enough, every time I ate the conventional apple, my stomach just pain. It was just so much pain. And the organic apple did not do that. So it turns out, I found out only like maybe 2 years ago that I have some genetic predispositions that I actually have 0% ability to clear pesticides and herbicides from my body. So it makes perfect sense that I have experience. Yeah. And so, you know, I'm not the only one that, you know, is experiencing that. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm such a stickler for organic, because if we choose organic, we're going to in some ways avoid some of these issues like the glyphosate, the BT corn. And BT corn is corn that is infused with this bacillus bacteria that is the bacillus bacteria will kill some, like the larvae of insects. And so it's an insecticide, a natural insecticide. But, you know, if it's killing bugs, what is it doing to the bacteria in your gut when you eat it? You know, that's the problem. So when you choose organic, you're going to avoid BT corn, you're going to avoid glyphosates and GMOs. But this person brings up a great question about, well, what about the mineral content, the vitamin content? Because the way that we farm today has drastically reduced the nutrient content in our soils. And so the nutrient content in our foods is a small fraction of what it was even 100 years ago. So it would be awesome to know, how good quality our food is. But unfortunately, I wish there was a test that could do this. One of the things I like to do, especially in the summers, is I really utilize farmers markets because I find that their farming practices tend to be better. Even if you're buying organic at the big grocery store, it's still, most of these companies are still these mass produced, these mass productions, which means to me that a lot of them are not practicing the small permaculture or regenerative farming practices. So utilizing a farmer's market is great, or I suggest you grow your own. And if you don't have a lot of space, you can even grow herbs right on your windowsill, and you can do that year round. You can grow sprouts on your windowsill year round. It's very inexpensive, and it's very nutrient dense, and it's the best way to do it, because then you have them right there. You're in control. You got to get a good quality potting soil, organic potting soil for that, but it's a great way to add nutrient density into your diet in an inexpensive way. And so, yeah, that was a long kind of adult answer to that question, but
that was great information. Thank you. So now jumping over into the live Q&A, let's start with Marley. She asked a few questions, so you can pick which of them. I'll read through them and you can respond however you prefer. So Marley asks, are Epsom salt baths beneficial for detox, and how often? Is herbal Japanese knotweed supplement helpful? And then finally, she asks about the key, the QI key EMF radiation device, which you don't have to talk about specific brands, but I believe that is a negative ion generator. So perhaps you can speak to the if you have insight onto that. So first is Epsom salt baths, herbal Japanese knotweed, and then negative ion generators.
Okay, great. So Epsom salt baths, yes, excellent. So Epsom salts are a form of magnesium. So I think that they can be great. And it's kind of like the float tanks. If you've ever had the ability to do a float tank, those can be incredibly relaxing. But the Epsom salts are also, they help with detox because they're rich in sulfur, and sulfur is needed for liver detoxification. So I think that Epsom salt baths are great. Now, not everybody reacts well to sulfur. Some people can have a sulfur intolerance, so it may or may not work for you. But generally, Epsom salts are fine for the majority of people. How often? Boy, I can't give a good, recommendation on that, because everybody is going to be different. And anytime that you're doing something like this, you want to be really slow to make sure that you're not overdoing it and that you're responding well. So if you're going to take an Epsom salt bath, I would start out really slow, like add a cup, and maybe see how you do for the rest of the week, and if everything's okay, and then the next time you add 2 cups. I mean, you can add like many pounds of Epsom salts to a bath to get the benefits, and you want to make it as hot as possible so that your pores open up and that you actually are gonna get some of that sulfur and some of that magnesium into your circulation. But yeah, how often? I mean, difficult for me to make a recommendation. I wouldn't probably do it more than once or twice a week, but you got to go low, low and slow as a general rule to make sure that you react to them okay. They can be very helpful. So Japanese knotweed. Yes, Japanese knotweed is a great supplement, and it is very rich in antioxidants. Let's see, I believe it also has some cardiovascular benefits to it. well, most antioxidants do, just because. Yeah, it's a good one. There's several that are similar to the Japanese knotweed, but if that's the one that you like, absolutely go for it. And then the Chi Machine, yeah. So I have several clients that have those, and this is one of those. Just like with other harmonizers, there's many of these devices on the market. We just don't know. So I have, like I said, I have many clients that have them, and some of my, and I'm always very curious, like, what do you think? Are you experiencing any benefits from it? And a lot of the time they're like, I don't know, I can't tell. And then sometimes they're like, oh yeah, I can tell a big difference. Actually, just recently here in New Mexico, I did a assessment, and the homeowner had one, and she said that it's the small movable one, and she sleeps much better with it when it's in her room, her bedroom. So great. Okay. That's awesome. I can't verify the efficacy of those in any way with my meters. My meters don't change. So we're really going on faith here to if we're going to believe some of the marketing claims that the manufacturers make. And I know that many of these manufacturers have, I don't know, some pretty sophisticated language about what they do. Some of it may be completely bogus. Some of it may be legit, but there's no product yet that I've seen that I can say for absolute certainty, yes, this one works, do it. We just don't know. We're kind of working on faith here. So it's up to you if you kind of want to, spend your money and see if it works for you.
Great. Thank you, Cathy. I'm going to move on now to Emma's question. But before I do, I see that Suzanne had a question. She put it in the chat pod, but I happened to catch it. She's wondering if the types of radioactive materials that someone like Madame Curie, Marie Curie worked with, is that related to EMF? And the answer is no, it's not related to this type of EMF. When you hear about radioactive materials, you hear about X-rays and gamma rays. That is EMF, but that is really high energy EMF, and it's called ionizing. And because it has so much energy, it can ionize your cells. And that's super dangerous stuff. That's why you wear a lead coat when you get your dental x-rays done, and the x-ray technician actually leaves the room, so they're nowhere near it. That's how dangerous it is. The types of EMF that are emitted by cell phones and Wi-Fi and things like that, that has much less energy, and it's called non-ionizing. It's still harmful to human health, but it is not nearly as harmful, or certainly as immediately harmful as those higher energy forms. So it's basically a different force from that perspective. So now we have a question from Emma, and I like this one, which is what brand of supplements can you recommend? Because I know that when it comes to supplements, the brand really, really matters. And that's really the only thing you have to go on, because you're not going to investigate the quality of every pill that you get. So what brands do you recommend?
Yes, that is a fantastic point. There's a lot that are good. Actually, so on my website, wholehomeandbodyhealth.com, I have a dispensary there, and it's free for anyone to sign up for that dispensary, and it's through Emerson Ecologics, or that's the company, and then the dispensary is called Wellate. But if you go to my website and sign up for that, all of the brands that they sell, I trust. So I really like this company because they only sell some of the highest quality brands. And so, I mean, just off the top of my head, brands like Thorne, Gaia, not Metagenics. Just thinking of one, it just escaped me. Da Vinci is good. The Now brand, which is relatively inexpensive, but they have pretty good quality products. They're less expensive because of the volume that they do. Other brands, there's so many. I mean, there's just so many. And then there's specialty brands that I specifically buy from, like Microbiome Labs, which sells spore-based probiotics, and a bunch of other fish oil that they sell, which is great. Some antifungals. So, you know, there's for specific things that I really want to go right to the manufacturer, you know, something like Microbiome Labs, I will do that. Otherwise, I would just say check out that Emerson Ecologics or that Wellevate dispensary, because all of the brands on there are great. That would make it the easiest.
Cool. I'm sorry. I can't tell if my mic is on. Yeah, it is. Okay, great. Thank you, Cathy. So next is, I apologize. I'm almost certainly going to get this name wrong, but Colina or Cholina is asking the question is, are processed sugars especially harmful? I'm assuming the answer to that is yes, but maybe if you could go into a little detail of why that is.
Yeah, so there's many reasons why. And so, you know, I should say that part of the problem with processed sugars is that in today's world, so many of us have chronic underlying health conditions because of the way that we've been living, that having this processed sugar just throws us off balance. So, I mean, I know, you know, elite athletes that are extremely healthy and, you know, have a rigorous exercise routine every day, and they do all the things that they're supposed to be doing. And, you know, someone like that can handle a certain amount of processed sugars much more readily than somebody with chronic health conditions or somebody that doesn't have that level of activity, because they're going to properly utilize it. You know, when you're doing a high level of endurance or intensity exercise, you actually need some sugars. You need to replace that sugar in your muscles and in your liver. But for most of us, we're not doing that. And our standard American diet and most of our Western diets are so high in processed foods. We're just getting this huge amount of sugar. And so it's just this blood sugar balance, you know, this blood sugar roller coaster that it puts us on all day long. Just like I mentioned, when your blood sugar is out of balance, you get this negative hormone response, and it keeps you in this this heightened kind of this HPA axis response, the hypothalamus pituitary axis response, which says, I need sugar now, you know, this is a dangerous situation. And then insulin gets involved and cortisol gets involved to tell the liver to release sugar. And all of those stress hormones are stolen from what would otherwise be your cholesterol production or your sex hormone production. You know, some of these other really beneficial hormones that you need is stolen because they're taken in order to try to balance your blood sugar. And it's very, very stressful to the body. And in addition, you know, I can't tell you how many people I work with that have fungal overgrowths because of the huge amount of sugar that they're eating. And when you've got a fungal overgrowth, I'm telling you, you do not feel good. You got brain fog, you can't sleep well, you've got skin issues. I mean, everything suffers. So, you know, and additionally, if you're eating foods with a lot of processed sugar, what are you not eating? Oh, you know, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, you know, protein, fiber. So there's so many reasons why we should be avoiding these processed sugars. There's just no health benefits to them, and they can really set you up for a lot of damage down the line.
Thank you. Next, Luke asks, what do you think about gluten? Because more and more people, he's talking about people experiencing inflammation from gluten. So what are your, I know gluten's a pretty hot topic. What's your input on this?
Well, gosh, that is a really hot topic. So I think that because of the way, at least here in the US, because of the way that our wheat is grown, I think most people would be better off to avoid it. You know, and I know people don't like that answer, but there's just not a lot of good that's going to come from it, because it does, you know, it does open up your tight junctions and in the digestive tract. And some people's digestion, if it's awesome and you don't have any chronic health issues, and you feel like you can eat anything, you might not, your body's resilient and it can repair itself from that gluten that you do eat. But most of us these days don't, because we just have so many other things that we're exposed to and so many poor lifestyle habits and practices. So here in the US, I think that really most of us would be better off to avoid it. But I know many, many people, including people with celiac disease, when they travel through Europe, for example, they don't have the same responses because it's a different plant. And a lot of people can eat things like einkorn wheat, which is more of an ancient wheat that hasn't gone through all this hybridization that our current wheat does, and they do just fine with that. So it's very individual, like as all things are with nutrition. But as a general rule, yeah, I honestly, I just think that most of us would be better off avoiding it, unfortunately.
Thank you. Okay, now on a different topic, John Clapp, who's advising me to in the chat to only eat organic turmeric, which I try to do. John has a question about dirty electricity. He says, and this is earlier in the talk, you mentioned that one of the symptoms you find reported by people is stabbing sensations. He's asking if you could describe those symptoms a little bit more. It sounds like maybe he's wondering if to compare it to maybe something he's experiencing. Then he has some other questions about dirty electricity. Will dirty electricity in a wire create an EMF field outside the wire? And then finally, do you have a preference for meters for dirty electricity between Green Wave and Stetzer?
Yeah, okay. So the stabbing sensations, I don't experience this, so I'm going off of what some of my clients tell me. And they literally say it's like somebody has a knife and they're stabbing them. I mean, these are extremely sensitive people, but when they're in the proximity of it, because what dirty electricity does, I kind of equate it to a dam. So you've got your electricity going to the source. Okay, so you've got 60 hertz going to the source, say it's a light bulb, and then that light bulb is an LED light bulb. And what it wants to do is change the frequency. It wants to reduce the power. Well, if I'm 60 hertz and I'm going to the light bulb and you want to change it, well, then what happens to that electricity? Where does it go? It comes out, right? It comes out into the wall. It comes out into our space. And we call it micro surges. And so it's these micro surges that come out. And so people will say it's like they're just getting stabbed, like with a knife. I mean, it's ugly. And it can be very, very, very painful for these people. But everyone's symptoms are different. So, those like pin poking, it could also be that. So, and these are just things that people tell me. And I should say, I do hear this from radio frequency as well. And it's probably a little bit different, but I hear it most often from the dirty electricity. Yeah, it's not fun. So you have metal clad, I'm assuming, metal clad wiring in your house, MC wire. So metal clad is basically just, and I'm sure for people that don't know, I'm just seeing if there's any out here I can see, because I am in a place where there's electricity. The metal clad is just like a metal tube that you run wires through. And that's great. And when somebody is building a new home, I always recommend that they run the wires through metal clad, because that will block the electric field substantially. It will block the DE field to some degree, but remember that DE has electric and magnetic field components. And so it will block the components of the electric field substantially, but not the magnetic field. So it depends on, what else is going on in the home. So it will block it. It is fantastic, but you may still have a little bit of a magnetic field outside the wire. And if it's just a regular old wire, regular old Romex plastic jacketed wiring, that doesn't block anything. So, even though the wire is in your wall and the copper or aluminum or whatever it is through that plastic jacket does nothing. and everything's just coming out into your living space. Okay, and so then his last question, meters. Let's see, Trifield was your second choice. What was the second one? Greenwave or Stetzer, they're both.
Yeah, he's asking about Greenway versus Stetzer.
Yeah, I don't have a
Yeah,
preference.
they
I
do
use
different
them
units,
both.
right, Kathy?
Yes, so Stetzer uses
They
grams,
do different units.
which are kind of their own math equation, and Greenwave uses millivolts. I don't have. They're both good. I don't necessarily. I use them both just because I like to compare. I find that they both give similar results. They're both good, so either one would be fine. I use an oscilloscope.
Cool, thank you.
Most of the time, yeah. But anyway.
Right. Yeah, and you talked about that a lot in the webinar on solar. So let me find that link and put it in the chat pod.
Yeah.
So let me thank you, John. Next, Pat asks, she replaced her cordless phone with a corded phone that doesn't have caller ID. But if she's asking, or he, sorry, I don't know, Pat, if I buy a new corded phone with caller ID, will the electric cord cause EMF problems? So it sounds like Pat is really trying to minimize the amount of EMF coming from the phone. And, moving to a corded phone is obviously a huge step, but I guess a regular corded phone just gets its power from the phone line. But if you get one with fancier features like caller ID or voicemail or whatever it is, how much EMF is emitted by that just powering the phone off of the wall?
Yeah, good question. I don't know without testing it, but I'm going to put a link in the chat right here for a phone that less EMF cells, and I think so. Didn't work. It's an ultra low. Yes, it did. It's ultra low EMF phone, and so that may help to reduce some of those problems. I can't remember if I'm pretty sure it's got a caller ID function on it, and it's got because it has a digital screen at the top, and you can do multiple lines and everything. So I would just do something like that, because it's gonna be low EMF, because otherwise I don't really know without testing. But if you can always wrap cords in aluminum and ground them, because I don't know also what field you're talking about. I mean, probably the electric field or the dirty electricity field is what you're concerned about. But I think it would probably be pretty negligent.
Negligible?
Sorry, negligible, yes. As my brain continues. I mean, I'm just thinking, you're not.
No worries.
Distance is your friend. So if you're on the phone and you've got your corded phone and you're hanging, you're down here, you're talking over here and the cord is over there, I mean, that distance is going to be enough. So I don't think that I would probably worry about it too much, but I could never say for sure without testing.
Yeah, I would say, if that's the type of thing that you're concerned about or worried about or interested in, Pat, that's definitely a good reason to learn how to test. And we have a lot of great information about that. I'm going to paste that into the chat pod here in a second. But we have a guide that recommends certain meters. It explains how to use them. Cathy gave a great webinar earlier this year about testing. Because this is an example I've been giving a lot lately, but I was staying in a rental last year, and just for fun, because it's the kind of guy I am, I took out my meter and I was measuring around the place, and I was getting these crazy electric field readings off of the entertainment center in the living room. And I'm like, what is I mean, I don't remember the actual numbers, but it was like numbers I've never seen before on my Trifield. And it turns out it was the DVD player, which of course we weren't even using, because who uses the DVD player anymore? And so I unplugged it and it all went away. And, it just goes, I wouldn't have guessed that, it just goes to show how all of these devices they're just going to be different, based on how they're designed, how they're manufactured, what else might be plugged in the same. It could be having a negative reaction based off of other things that are plugged into the same outlet. So you really need to test in order to know what different devices are doing to your environment. Great question. Thank you, Pat. Okay. John asks, do you think selenium, which I know what that is, but TMG? So I don't know what that is, Cathy, maybe you do, but do you think selenium and or TMG have any effect on EMF resilience?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I looked up that phone and it does have caller ID and I just placed it in the chat. So I would just get that phone. So selenium, awesome. Selenium's fantastic. It is its own antioxidant and helps to protect against mercury exposure. So although, you got to be careful because, and actually, I think it was Bob put in the chat, that not everybody is the same. And like she said, turmeric, which is excellent, which everybody's saying, turmeric is the thing that everyone's supposed to be taking. She had to eliminate it in order to heal her gut. And I know people that don't tolerate turmeric well. So just like with everything else, selenium is good. It's important, but it may or may not be appropriate for you. And too much selenium can have negative effects. So you don't want to get too much selenium. I actually like to get it through Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts, like two or three Brazil nuts a day typically will give you the recommended daily allowance of selenium, or the recommended, your recommended dose of selenium. However, like I said earlier, all soil is different. And so the actual levels that you're getting out of one Brazil nut are going to be different, but that's the best way to get it. If you eat a lot of fish like tuna, I think it's really important to take selenium when you're eating fish. I just stopped eating tuna altogether because of the mercury content, and other big fishes as well. Fish. Other. But if you find yourself consuming, let's say you're going to go out for sushi or something, I think it's a good idea to take a selenium supplement. TMG, which is trimethylglycine, is a form of glycine, which is great. And TMG is also a source of betaine, and it has great cardiovascular properties to it. That's a good question about whether or not it will be protective against EMF exposure. I'm not sure about that one, but I will say that TMG is a big methyl donor, and you got to be real. I mean, methylation is something, there are people that undermethylate, there are people that overmethylate. You got to be extremely careful when you take supplements that are methyl donors, because that's one of the ones that's really easy for people to react to. So I don't know. I'll have to look into that one a little bit more to see if TMG would help, with EMF resilience. But since it does help with the cardiovascular properties and it helps to open up blood vessels, I mean, anytime we can increase blood oxygenation and blood flow, we're going to help ourselves. So peripherally, it may, but I'll look into that one a little bit more.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Laura says her functional doctor tells her that organic fields can be right next to ones that are being sprayed with glyphosate, etc. So I was going to ask you, actually, if you could talk just a little bit, so that people, we all know what we'd like organic to mean, but what does organic actually mean? And are there different meanings, from different groups or different food producers? What does, if you're buying something that, organic berries, what does it actually mean that they're organic?
Okay. Yeah, so that's actually a very good point, because your doctor is correct in that pretty much all fields, the question is there such a thing as organic anymore? Because there are seeds, Monsanto seeds mostly, that most large farm productions buy, and they're sprayed, they're heavily sprayed, and then there can be an organic farm close by and they get some residual effect from that. It's absolutely true. And it's really unfortunate. So when you buy organic food, in order for a food to have an organic label on it, it must have gone through a pretty rigorous inspection by the FDA, and they test it to see that it falls under a certain threshold of pesticides and herbicides. And it's not cheap. I mean, it takes a lot for these farmers to go through this certification process. So I do trust it. It also means that it cannot be GMO. So if your food has an organic label on it, it cannot be GMO, and it has to have, fall under the threshold of pesticides and herbicides. Now, some small amounts are allowed because it's impossible, completely impossible for pretty much anything in the world today to be truly organic, meaning that it does not have pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, residue. So that's essentially the organic definition, is that there are no chemically based pesticides, herbicides, and chemicals. There's no chemicals on it. Now there are natural methods of using pesticides and herbicides that are not chemically based, but any organic food will not have these industrial chemicals on it. Nor can it be a GMO product. So, and fortunately over the years, I've seen those standards kind of be reduced for various reasons, but part of the reason is because of industry influence. And part of the reason is because, just like you're saying, you can't, when you spray a field, you can't control what goes up in the air and ends up on somebody else's field. So it's really unfortunate. And that's why I really like to support small local organic farmers and people that are practicing permaculture, because the more of us that buy from these companies with the best farming practices, the more demand there will be for these better farming practices, and the less demand there will be for these huge corporate farming, and the less chemicals used, et cetera. So we need to vote with our dollars here and support these small local farmers so we have less of this happening. But yeah, it's just an unfortunate fact of being in today's modern world.
Thank you, Cathy. Great answer. Great question, Laura. Thank you for asking. Let's see. Becky asked if there will be a replay. The answer is yes. I'm not quite sure when it'll be posted, but I'd say by Monday to our YouTube channel. So that's youtube.com/shieldYourBody. And that's where the webinar archives go. Thank you, Becky. Okay. So Marley asks two questions. One is pretty broad. So let's start with the second part. Regarding the article on calcium voltage channel opened by EMFs, how does this relate or compare to ionic detox foot bath that does the same by opening, but to release metals? Do you understand that question, Cathy?
Yeah. So the ionic foot baths, so these are little chambers that you put your feet into, and then there's this electric component, and it works by electrolysis, actually. So I wouldn't put them into the same category necessarily. So the ionic foot baths, what happens is the current that goes through the water, they put salt in the water, and the current that goes through the water actually breaks the water into positively charged ions and negatively charged ions. And then it's those ions in the water that actually attract to oppositely charged toxins, which are usually heavy metals. That's what we're usually after. And then it pulls the heavy metals through the pores of the feet, because you've got the most pores in your feet, actually. So I don't consider that to be the same thing. And it's funny, these ionic foot baths get a lot of negative press and whether or not they work or not, because when you run them, the color changes in the water regardless of if your feet are in them or not. I think what matters is the quality of the foot bath, actually, because I have seen some legitimate research showing that they work. And I think, you know, ultimately some are good, some aren't so good, but you know, I wouldn't put them in the same category. And I think they can be helpful to, I mean, because that attraction to the oppositely charged ions is helpful, and it will pull some heavy metals out of your body. So as long as you're doing doing it in a good quality product, I think it can be helpful.
Great, thank you. Now, the first question, this is a bit more open-ended, so answer it however you feel is best. But I gather there's cell phone towers at the end of her street. She says the RF is over the 10,000 max number on the meter. I don't know exactly what meter she's talking about, but 10,000 is going to be a very high value on any meter. So aside from moving, which she is planning to do, what other protection do you suggest?
Yeah, well, yeah. So, I mean, shielding is the first thing that comes to my mind. If you've got 10,000 on your meter, and like you said, I don't know what meter that is, but shielding seems like it would be very important. So if you're moving, you know, then great. Just make sure that you test wherever you move to first. And I would say like a bed canopy, or like, you know, the shield your body bed canopy would be a good strategy here, depending on how long it's going to be before you move, because 10,000 is extremely high. And, you know, I'm just going to say, we're going to assume that you've already taken care of everything else in your house, right? That this is not coming from your Wi-Fi or your phone or your smart anything inside the house. But in the meantime, yeah, I would consider a bed canopy, because that high of a number, you need to shield from that. I mean, all of the solutions, all of the things that we're talking about today, are going to be helpful, but with a number that high, you need to get some distance from that as soon as possible. And a bed canopy would be my suggestion.
Yeah, so I pasted the link to the bed canopy in the chat. Anyone who clicks that link, they're going to see it's not an inexpensive product, because it is made from a lot of silver, and so it's quite expensive to make these things. And I didn't add that expensive a product to my catalog, you know, without a lot of thought. I mean, that's the only product I have that costs over $100, and it costs quite a bit more. But the reason I added it to the catalog, and the reason I think it's so important, is because there are situations where there's just a whole bunch of EMF from sources you can't control, and you know, shielding your whole home is very difficult and exceedingly expensive. And you really need an expert to do it if you're going to do it, and it requires a lot of lifestyle changes at the same time. And so it's just impractical to shield your whole home. So a bed canopy at least creates a safer space for you, and it's in your bedroom, and it protects you while you sleep. So it's a big chunk of the day. It's certainly a big chunk of the time you spend at home. And it's also a really important time, which Cathy has talked about in previous webinars. It's a really important time because that's when your body is supposed to restore and re-energize for the next day. So protecting yourself at that time is just really important. So it doesn't, you know, a bed canopy isn't going to solve all your problems. It's not going to shield your entire home, but it is a solution that can make a really big difference for those people living in higher EMF areas. So thank you, Marley. Let's see what we got here. Great question. And Cathy, I think you are working on content related to this topic for later this year. But Bill asks, do you know if a hybrid vehicle, when not operating under electric power, so basically a hybrid running off of gas, is that still giving off high levels of EMF?
Possibly. Totally depends. Totally depends on the car, because like I have a Toyota Sienna vehicle, and when I test, it's all gas, you know, and it actually has one of the highest electric fields that I've tested in a car. I have no idea why. And it was really disappointing to me. So the magnetic fields are low, there's no radio frequency, but the electric fields are high. And so I've been testing a bunch of cars recently. as part of my research. And, you know, just every single car is different. I will say that I tested a Toyota Prius. I think it was a 2016, I want to say. And I found that the electric fields were quite low. And it was probably, I don't know if it was on the battery or the electric. I'm not sure which one, but the levels were quite low. And then I recently tested a Chevy Volt. It was very high. The electric field was very high. And I tested a Tesla, and the electric fields were, I'd say, medium in the Tesla, but the RF, the radio frequency, was off the charts. So, you know, we just don't know. Every single car is going to be different. Even every different models of the same, you know, different years of the same make and model of the cars. They're all different. So you just have to test. And I have a YouTube channel where I show my videos of me testing these cars, if you want to go check them out. So, you know, in theory, we would hope that the electric fields would be lower when it's just on gas. But you got to remember, you've got the alternators, and you've got the speaker systems, and you've got your whole dashboard's electric. So there's all these other electrical pieces to it that you know, and motors turning, that are going to have the potential to have high fields. So it doesn't necessarily matter, I found in my testing, whether it's hybrid or not. It's all the other components, unfortunately.
Yeah, but that said, it's my understanding that in general, just on average, in general, hybrid cars are going to have the highest levels of EMF emissions, and then electric cars will be a little bit better, and then internal combustion engine cars are the lowest. But to your point, there's all these other sources in a car now. And it's not just the engine or the power source that's going to be a source of EMF emissions. And increasingly, you don't just have keyless entry, but you have Bluetooth in the car. These Teslas have multiple wireless connections, and increasingly other manufacturers as well, to the central hub to send and receive data and to communicate with other vehicles. And all of these are so I actually have, I'm not going to say which kind, but I have a super low tech car. It's like one of the lowest tech cars that you can find. For some reason, it has Bluetooth in the stereo, but that was pretty easy to disable. And that's really the only I mean, it even has roll down windows. It doesn't have power windows, doesn't have power locks. But those are increasingly hard to come by. Thank you, Bill. Caroline asked, do you have any devices which can protect the home? So the canopy, which I just talked about before seeing your question, that's really the best home protection option that we have. But we have a whole category called for home and office, but other than the bed canopy, they're smaller solutions to, shield a Wi-Fi router specifically or something. They're not like whole home protection. Actually, that reminds me, Cathy has a post, which I believe is, I'll have to find it after I finish talking here, about protecting the home. So I will find that and paste that into the chat pod in a minute here. So let me thank you, Carolyn. Anonymous asks, I am renting and would like to remove the electric radiation from the bedroom at night. Is there a temporary solution to doing that without physically switching on and off the circuit breaker?
Well, yes, there are options. I mean, even if you're renting, you can still turn off the breaker, assuming that you can get to the breaker. But, you got to test. You got to test to make sure that when you turn off the breaker, it gives you the results you're looking for. I just leave, if it's a factor of, I don't want to go outside to turn it off every day or whatever, just leave it off. I mean, in my bedroom, the circuit is permanently off. I don't have anything in my bedroom that I need electricity for. So that's one option. Otherwise, One thing that you can do is move the bed away from the wall. So generally, the large majority of the time, our highest fields are going to be right next to the wall because that's where the wires are. So if you move the bed away from the wall a couple feet, you should see your electric field drop. Of course, I can't guarantee that without knowing all the other specifics and testing. So you do want to test, but usually that will help. Another thing that you can do, and this is something that I do when I'm doing assessments for people, is I've got like this like metallic vapor barrier. I got a big roll of it, and I will put this it's like a foil, but it's thicker industrial foil, and I will put the foil the whole length of the headboard behind the bed, and that usually can block the electric field pretty well. But again, you got to test to make sure that you're getting the results you want. So, and it's gonna matter. Do you have a floor beneath you that's got lights in it? Do you have something above you, on the sides of you? I mean, there's so many variables here. But those are a few things that you could try. You know, like I said, just you got to have an electric field meter to test this to make sure. But those are some pretty inexpensive things that you can do to reduce them if you don't want to turn off the breakers.
That was great. Thank you very much, Cathy. Next question from Anonymous. I do not know if it's the same Anonymous, but do you have recommendations? And I know this is a big topic, so maybe you just have a few bullet points, but detoxing from EMF.
Well, I mean, ultimately, like we reviewed, it's the oxidative stress that's happening. So you're not necessarily going to detox from the EMF, but you're going to combat the oxidants with antioxidants. So, you know, some of the foods that are high in antioxidants, like I mentioned, and supplements that are high in antioxidants, things like glutathione, vitamin C. Rosemary tincture is fantastic. That's one of my favorites. Propolis. Those are all supplements that you could use to help mitigate the oxidative stress that's happened from your exposure. And then, you know, just to kind of piggyback on that, when we were talking about detoxing, you know, I did mention some of the precursors that will make people more sensitive to their EMF exposure. And one of those is heavy metals, and heavy metals is big. So do we want to detox from heavy metals or, you know, glyphosate or other chemicals? Yes, we do. But you got to be very, very, very careful with this. I don't like these detox programs that people join, or you buying a detox books and going through these detox things. I actually, years ago, I did that and I became significantly worse. All of my symptoms became significantly worse from detoxing because I didn't know what I was doing. And I just followed this book and I went through this detox. And what I didn't know then was that, you know, if your elimination channels aren't open properly, so you're not having 2 bowel movements a day, you're not sweating, you've got sluggish bile, all of these things that where we store some of our, you know, heavy metals and other chemicals, if those pathways aren't open and working properly and you begin to detox, you're just going to stir up all this stuff and you're going to make yourself significantly worse. So I just throw that out there as a word of caution because I see this, you know, detox is such a popular thing. You really got to know what you're doing or work with a practitioner, and before you begin to detox from anything, and make sure that your elimination pathways are open. And I did see another question about sauna therapy for this, and I think this is a good time to answer that one too. I think sauna is fantastic. I think infrared saunas are excellent because we sweat. We need to be sweating, and sweating is a safe way to open up an elimination pathway so that when we are detoxing, it's a pathway for these heavy metals and other things, these chemicals, to exit the body. But you got to be very careful about saunas because the large majority of them are extremely high in EMFs. Okay. So, you know, I've tested so many, and I've got a few on my YouTube channel that I've shown. even the ones that say that they're low EMF, it drives me bonkers because they have all this marketing and this beautiful slick advertising showing that their products are low EMF, but then when I go in and test them, they're not. And they say this a lot of times because they're testing maybe just one field. So they're testing just the magnetic field and they're like, see, it's all low EMF. And I go in and test the electric field and it's off the charts, or they have Bluetooth in there or something. So you got to be really careful about that. There's one sauna company that I trust. It's called Radiant Health Saunas. They actually worked with a building biologist to make sure that they were doing this properly, and it's low VOC and it's low EMF. I'll put a link to it in the chat. They're excellent. I don't know. My chats weren't going to everyone. That's weird.
Yeah, you had it set to send just to the panelists.
Oh, okay. So anyway, yeah. So they're fantastic, and I have a code for them too. I'll put in the chat as well. You can save $500. I have this on my website if anybody wants to look at it. But yeah, they're excellent. So detoxing important, but make sure you do it properly.
Great, thank you. Fantastic information. Let me just mark those questions as answered. Marley has another set of questions here, but before we do that, there's another anonymous question. Can the SYB bed canopy be grounded to deflect away the electric radiation? So the answer is yes, it can be grounded. There are these alligator clip grounds that you can get. I think they're around $10, $15 on Amazon. And so it certainly can be grounded. It does not need to be grounded. And we've, both Cathy and I have talked a lot about this in past webinars. We don't necessarily advise that your canopy should be grounded. And the reason has to do with, because once you ground a product, that's going to discharge from the product into the ground, but it will also carry current from the ground into the product. Not current, the dirty electricity from the electrical wiring in your home. So when you ground a product, you're creating a bi-directional flow. And there is a growing amount of concern that, particularly in the dirtier, the areas with dirtier electricity, that grounding into your wall is going to have some negative consequences that you don't want. Now, if you can ground it into the actual earth, and the earth doesn't have a lot of bad ground current going through it, that's a great solution. But a lot of people don't live in places where that's an option. Cathy, did you want to say anything else on that point before we move on?
Yeah, no, you covered that well. To ground or not to ground, that is the question, right? And you got to test to see if it's appropriate for you.
Cool, thank you. Okay, Marley asked, and we're getting to the end of the questions here, which is good because we're getting to the end of the session. So you've been really generous with your time today, Cathy. Thank you. She asks a few questions. So do you feel that the Loco Sauna grounding mat works as well as a bed canopy for bedtime? I don't know what that product is, so maybe you do. Next is, how do you feel about shungite crystals? So for that one, we actually have a post. So I'll just paste the link to that post in the chat pod. And then finally, do EMF supplements like Liddell, EMF Detox, and Energetics HEPA tone really help?
Okay, so the Locusana, that is, they use those in the beds. What is the bed system called? I forget off the top of my head, but it's a natural bed system, and then they ground it. Well, it's the same thing that you were just talking about. You got to be careful anytime you're grounding, and I know that they use the electrical outlet to ground. You got to be very careful with that, because you've got a lot of dirty electricity on your ground wires, then you're creating another issue. I do believe that there are some companies that are working on like a filter, so that when you ground to an electrical outlet, you're not going to get that backflow. So that is, I'm not sure if they're using that. They may be. but you just got to be careful. The best way you could do it is if you could ground it to the outside, to the earth. That would be best. So, and it's different. It's completely different from a bed canopy or shielding paint, because the grounding mat is just potentially reducing your to ground something is to reduce the electric field. To paint or canopy, you can actually reduce the electric field as well, but you're also blocking the radio frequency. So if you only use a ground mat, you are not blocking any radio frequency. So it's a little bit different of applications there. And so really it depends on your specific situation. I can't really say what's better for you without knowing all the specifics about what fields you have, how much dirty electricity you have on your wires, and what you're trying to mitigate. So we need more information there. Shungite crystals. So
yeah, I pasted the answer.
Yeah, awesome. That's what I was just going to
one.
say. That's an excellent article, and I would suggest reading that. Yeah, we don't know. The bottom line is they might work, they might not. If you want to carry around a shungite crystal in your pocket, great, but we can't really say for sure how much they're doing. The light out EMF detox. Yeah, that's like a homeopathic supplement. And as such, I have seen homeopathics, or maybe it's a drainage. It's in that realm of homeopathic drainage supplements. Maybe. So I have seen those products work great for some people and do nothing for other people, just like everything else. I've actually tried it. I didn't see anything from it, but I don't respond to homeopathics for some reason. But other people do. So I don't, there's the science behind it is difficult to qualify, but I definitely know that people, will respond to these products. So it all, you may or you may not. So
thank you.
Try it. Yeah.
And thank you, Marley. I'm gonna butcher this name as well. I apologize in advance. Kaney asks, would silver jewelry protect you from EMFs, or would it attract EMFs to you?
That's a great question. I would say it would probably attract, but probably not a lot. I mean, it also depends on the electric field that you're in. So it's the jewelry's not going to be grounded. So in theory, it's going to attract. But I don't, unless you're incredibly sensitive, I don't know that it would really attract that much, because I'm thinking small pieces. So if you're really sensitive, you might not want to wear it. You just have to kind of see how you feel with it. But ultimately, it would attract rather than repel.
Thank you. Now, Bill asks, can you wrap the charging transformer on a laptop or other device to shield from the EMFs? Yeah,
you can. Actually, I've done it. So you get your charging brick. I've got one right here because I'm plugged in to the computer. So let's show it here. So I'm assuming you're talking about the charging brick. You can wrap this in something like aluminum foil and then ground it. So you would put like a little alligator clip on it that you would ground to an outlet or to the outside. Now remember, there's a difference between grounding an item like this and grounding yourself. Okay, so when we're grounding an item like this, we're not as concerned about that dirty electricity as we are as when we're grounding something like a canopy or a mat that we're putting our bodies onto. Now, it can increase the dirty electricity field, but you don't want to be hanging out next to this anyway. It's also got a big magnetic field on it, almost always. So as long as you have this away from your body, it would be okay to wrap it in foil and ground it. You will get some reduction there, but also it's depending on the computer you have, it may be better to use your laptop when it's unplugged so that you eliminate the DE from this, and you eliminate the magnetic field, and you eliminate the electric field. So, you know, again, this is where testing is important, but the more you can use your laptop unplugged, generally, the better. But yeah, you could definitely try that. It works.
Thank you. That was great. Great question. Great answer. Visual aids. I love that. Okay. So we'll do one more question. And Marley asks, and you can also kind of address this in general terms. I think I know where you're going to go with the answer, but and this is following up about the Locosana grounding mat. So she's asking, would a green wave dirty electricity bedroom filter help with the issues that you were talking about when you answered a question about Locosana?
Well, yes, maybe. So the green wave filters are good. I like them, but I do not like to use them just kind of sporadically throughout the house. The best method for using these filters is actually installed before your breaker panel. So you have your electricity either coming from above a service entrance or from below, and where your electricity comes into your house before it gets to the breaker panel, I have an electrician install 2 new outlets right there, and that's where I like to put those filters, because then that will capture what's coming in from the grid. And then inside your house, you need to find the source that's causing your dirty electricity and remove it, essentially. So those filters are like a Band-Aid, which may help, but they can also move the dirty electricity from the hot wire to the neutral wire. And so you haven't really solved the issue, and they can cause problems upstream. So because they change the dynamics, they change the frequency characteristics, and they change how it's behaving. So that ultimately the best answer, filter at your panel, and then make sure that you're unplugging any devices inside the home that are contributing to your dirty electricity. So then you don't have to be concerned about grounding, assuming that you've mitigated all the other fields as well. I mean, the best thing here is to not solve the problem with a product, it's to remove the problem.
Thank you, Cathy. Thank you, Marley, for that. You came to the table today with a lot of great questions. And that we're coming up at the end of the second hour. So I think with that, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today's webinar. I see a lot of you stuck around for the whole thing. So I can see that this was good information for you. Cathy, on behalf of everybody here today, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise. Someone just asked, where on YouTube will it be? So let me just type that. It's youtube.com/shieldYourBody is our channel, and it'll be up probably by Monday, the link to this presentation. Also, I should note, here it is. There is a post and a video along with this month's content series about nutrition. So that's the link to read Cathy's article and to see our video summarizing a lot of the top level points from that article and from this webinar. Reminder to everybody here that there are the 2 special offers. The in-home assessments, if you live in the American West in any of those states that I mentioned earlier, you can book time with Cathy, get a great deal on in-home EMF assessments, as well as other building biology subjects. And through midnight tomorrow for the rest of this weekend, you can save 35% on Cathy, a booking time with Cathy for a virtual session. And you can do both of those at the links you see here on the screen. So shieldyourbody.com/Cathy will take you to her site to book the in-home assessments, and shieldyourbody.com/consult will take you to the page on my website to book a virtual session over Zoom with Cathy. So with that, thank you everyone for taking the time to attend, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Cathy.
Yep, see ya.